Okay, and for this tip, it's just a little bit different. There's not going to be an intro. There's not going to be an outro to close it up. This tip is an integration, a tie-in of all the 7 previous tips. Here's why. We have been in, shelter at home, stay at home for more than 21 days. Familiar with that number? As a leader, you should be. 21 days. It's commonly taught, excuse me, that it takes 21 days to build a new habit. So guess what? You have people sheltering in place. So they are now, they've now experienced enough time to become accustomed to, conditioned to a new normal. What that means is when we go back to work, when businesses open back up, when the shelter in place, the stay at home orders are lifted, things will be different. It's now guaranteed simply because of basic human behavior. You take people for a month, 2 months, put them in a completely different environment. Guess what? They now have new habits. They now have new expectations. They now have new wants and needs that are different from when they started, right? We started over here. Now we're moving forward into a new reality. Things are going to be different by definition when this is over. How are you preparing for that? Do you have a roadmap of your operations so you can look at it and see what's going to be relevant, what's not, what to drop, what to keep? Is the business that you're in still relevant to the marketplace? So here's an example. What I did for my own personal business, I took our plan for 2020, threw it in the trash can 2 weeks ago, drew a line and said, okay, let's assume that everything that we planned is now no longer relevant based on what the marketplace wants, right? If I'm selling something that the marketplace wants, they're not going to buy it. And started to look at it from a standpoint of, given where we're at now, what the immediate existing needs are, how that's evolving based on information we're getting, and picking up information and adapting fast. What is going to be viable for us in the future? What can we contribute that will have economic value to be fair trade, right? Look for opportunities to serve, find a need, fill it, coming from a place of service, fair trade and value. You earn a living, you build a living, create a living doing that. So take a hard look at your business. You know what? You may be out. Take the hospitality industry, for example. They are without revenue, no income for 90 days. Think about that. No income for 90 days. What would happen to your business? And then they're looking at the next 180 days, the next 2 quarters after that, of very slow recovery, which means revenue on the order of somewhere between 25%, maybe 75% if they're lucky, but more like 25 to 50% of what it was before the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders. What is your scenario? What is most likely? What are the extremes and what is most likely? And how do you fit into that now? Is your fit still good with that future reality? Money's going to be tight. Financing is going to be tight. Yeah, there's a CARE Act passed, and Washington's arguing about a whole nother $2 trillion plus that they're claiming they're going to dump into the business world, into the economy. You really think you're going to get a piece of that? You might not. You might look at it and not want it because of some of the strings attached. Personally, I'm still reading the CARE Act, just getting started because of other responsibilities I've had to get cleared off the deck to really start to dig into that, to look at, is it something you may not want? Do you really, here's a more fundamental question. Do you want to need federal assistance in order to survive through the rest of 2020? If not, you better be asking some hard questions, and you better be willing to just chuck it all and start over in a new direction based on what the current market needs are. Not saying that that's what's going to happen for you personally. That's not a prediction. Talking mindset. Where are you coming from and taking a look at this? So I backed up all the way to that. You may not need to, right? I talked to interview that I did that you'll see coming up as someone who is still teaching at a university, has lost some clients enough to feel the revenue, but still pretty stable, right? So they're at least 3/4 of the income that they had. That's not going to change. Now you may be in that situation, you may not, but get a realistic assessment. Take a look at it yourself, bounce it off of your external, outside your organization, trusted advisors, get some of your key teams, some of your key players that you do business with, perhaps even suppliers, sit down, take a look at what they think around your thinking, get their ideas, and spitball it. wargame it, as it's called, and take a look at where you're really at, so that then you can start planning. Say, okay, here's how we're going to proceed. We've got a couple ideas of contingencies of, if it's better, great. If it's worse, here's what we're going to do. If things that you assume might happen that you plan for, right? We know how plans work out. Once they start, they fall apart. The power is in the planning process. It is in the thought process, not in what you put out as a plan going forward. It's so that you can adapt faster. The more you think it through, the more prepared you'll be. The more options you will have top of mind when the time comes and you go, you know what, this isn't working. The marketplace doesn't want this anymore. If you're in consumer products, how much expendable income is going to be available? I'm thinking that for the take the first 75% in income level, they're going to be struggling. There's going to be high unemployment. It's already 13%. What if it goes 30, 35%? Be prepared for that. That is a realistic, based on what Goldman Sachs and some other knowledgeable organizations are saying, that is a reasonable possibility, not a prediction. And again, I'm not predicting. They didn't predict it. I'm not predicting it can happen. It's just in it, when you look at probability, and as a leader, you better think in terms of probability, not absolutes. In terms of probability, it has gone from a highly unlikely, almost impossible scenario to a possible, not probable, but it could happen. So how are you going to respond to that? How is the impact going to be on your suppliers and on your customers if that's the case? What happens if all this money pumped into the economy triggers high inflation? If you remember your macroeconomics courses, that is the outcome. Mathematically, you print a whole bunch of money, and sooner or later it triggers high inflation. Well, what will high inflation look like? Will that be 8, 9% versus something that we're comfortable with in the 2, 3, 4% range? Right? 7, 8% causes problems economically. What if it's 8, 9%? What if it goes 15%? What if you're old enough to remember the 1970s? And if you're not old enough, listen up. In the 1970s, we had 15, 20, 25% loans. The cost of money was 25 cents on the dollar. What happens if we see that? What happens if we see 10, 12, 15% inflation? Just doing some grocery shopping, this is anecdotal, and again, not a prediction, we've seen some things jump 30, 40% in price. And that's just based on availability, not gouging. It's not people saying, okay, yeah, we've got 5,000 rolls of toilet paper and we'll sell it to you for $100 a roll. It's not that kind of nonsense. This is just normal market pressure saying, you know what, some things we can't get them. And when we do, it's costing everybody more. So once it gets into the grocery store, prices are up. Would expect that to drift down, but how fast is that going to happen? It's going to be a slow recovery. If you're thinking otherwise, you may be in a unique situation where it'll be quick, right? Everybody goes, they say, okay, it's safe. We feel that the pandemic has passed. We're at a point where now it's okay for people to go back to a more routine life. You don't have to shelter at home. Don't shelter in place. You may be in a market that's going to respond fastly to that and spikes right back up. So you're 90% within 90 days of that, or say within 90 days of today, you might be back at 90% income or 90% revenue. What are the real odds of that happening given what you know right now in current trends? What if it's more like 45, 50%? So if you think that through, and again, not a prediction, not trying to spread gloom and doom, what I'm trying to do is say, look, here's some hard realities to look at. You're familiar with the Stockdale paradox, a term that was coined by Jim Collins? If not, look it up. Google it. You'll be able to find it real quick. Focus on hard reality. Think through the unthinkable a little bit and go, okay, how are you gonna work with that? Because if you have confidence that you can get through that when it turns out to be much better, which it most likely will, then you're even in a better position. You're not panicking. You can better assess incoming data. There's a lot of data and very little information right now. Right? There's a lot of talk, but not a lot of science. There's a lot of opinions, very little facts. There's the main talk that I'm still hearing in mainstream media, even though I only spend a couple of minutes a day checking it to see if there's anything new that I need to know. And this is a tip that I've gotten from top high-performing leaders, people like Darren Hardy, Bo Eason, Glenn Morshower. They're all talking about, hey, look, check, see, is there something we need to know in terms of whether to go out, not to go out? What are the current guidelines? That only takes about 15 minutes a day to get an update on. right? Or a few minutes in the morning, a few minutes in the evening to see where you're at. Then shut that stuff off because there's a lot of talk about models, but not about actual data. And it's the actual data and true data analysis that counts. If you're not savvy in that, you need to get someone on your team that is, and you need to get skilled enough in your own right that you can tell when somebody's buffaloing you and when they're not. Then I leave that right where it is. So that's this tip. It's a little bit longer, a little bit harder hitting, no fluff. Notice I'm in a different shirt, same background, but I'm in a different shirt because here's what I do. When I want to think out of the box, there's certain people that I reach out to. I don't have my same clothes on. I actually go sit. So I find somewhere else to sit. There's certain places that are good. I meditate a little bit. I think about it. This is just what works for me because I need to get centered, need to get the clutter out so that I can really allow myself to bring all of me and all my capability to the table when going, all right, got to man up and take a look at what could really be unpleasant and figure out what to do about that. So whatever your version of that is, do it, do something a little bit different. Change your environment, even if it's just going and sitting in the garage on a bar stool. I did that. That helped a little bit. It's just to change environment and think a little bit differently. Stop and do a set of 20 push-ups. I'm moving towards a health goal, which includes a weight goal. I'm 11 pounds in the right direction and moving on that and enjoying it. So I talked to somebody that is just chewing through Netflix, TV shows, movies. That's okay. I don't know about you. I'm not. Look, here's my last thought for you. You're a leader. So lead. You need to lead yourself first, right? What are you putting in? Who are you hanging around? Where are you getting information? How are you looking to the future so that you can provide guidance, mentoring, coaching, cheerleading for people that are going to need it? Because it's going to be a hard rest of the year. That is a prediction. It is going to be tough for people. It's just a matter of how tough. And as a leader, if you're sitting around eating snacks, lazing on the couch, watching TV, watching videos, whatever, and doing that for the bulk of your time, then here's a hard truth. You're not a leader. So just step back and get out of the way. If you are a leader, shoot me your comments. Reach out. I'm more than happy to bounce ideas off of you and share more about stuff that I've done personally and what I'm hearing from top leaders. It's sort of what this tips is for, and also some of the other stuff we'll be releasing over the next week or so. So hard truths, tying some stuff together. You'll be seeing some more tips following on the next day. But until then, I wish you the best. Stay healthy and safe, my friend.